The wait is over. We are here and ready to rock. Servus. Nice to see you.
Hi. Hi. Did you get my message?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. It's like I hope I hope the connection holds. Yeah.
I think it should be fine. I can hear you well. Can somebody else confirm that you can hear us well? You can see us? Yes, great. Yes, our audience is there. Love it. All right. So again, thank you everybody. We appreciate your patience. Happy Sunday. This talk is sponsored by the German Embassy, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you Lara-Sophie Milagro. Lara-Sophie and I met on the BGHRA stage 10 years ago. So it's also a little bit of an anniversary for us knowing each other and working with one another, and I am so very pleased to have the opportunity to do that. Lara-Sophie Milagro was born in Berlin and trained as an actress and singer in London, Berlin, and New York. Theater credits include Clybourne Park at the Staatstheater Mainz in 2011, Lost and Found at the Theater Kassel in 2017, Disgraced at the Residenztheater Munich from 2016 to 18, Die Kränkungen der Menschheit Kammerspiele Munich in 2020, and as an author and director, she staged Heimat, Bittersüße Heimat at Ballhaus Nauninstraße, Berlin in 2011, Sato at the Nationaltheater Mannheim in 2013, and Dauerkolonie Berlin at the Ballhaus Nauninstraße in 2018. TV credits include Dogs of Berlin on Netflix in 2019, Das Geheimnis des Totenwaldes on ARD 2021, Stralsund on ARD 2022, Der Greif on Amazon Prime 2022, busy year. Wir könnten genauso gut tot sein, Berlinale Film Festival 2022, and from 2018 to 2022, she also worked for Nachtkritik.de, a Berlin-based online platform dedicated to theater criticism and theater reporting in Germany, where her column Heimatgeschichten, Stories from Home appeared regularly. She also is the co-founder of the artists collective Label Noir Berlin, for which she works as an actress, director, author, and artistic director. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today, Lara-Sophie. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, apologies for being late. The connection broke down, and now I hope it's stable. And I feel very honored to be able to be here today, to be given this opportunity to speak to you, even though I'm in Berlin and many of you are on the other side of the ocean. But maybe one of the very few advantages of the pandemic is the fact that it established technologies that allow us to come together even though we're far apart from each other and share thoughts and ideas in conferences and discussion forums and panels like this one we're participating in here today. So heartfelt thanks for having me. Can you all hear me? Is the connection good? Okay, great. So staging Blackness and Whiteness from a Black German perspective is the title of my keynote today. And I would like to explore some discourses around the depiction and interpretation of Black and white identities in theater and film, by the example of a film production I was involved in as a producer, director, and actress, and that was shot last summer here in Berlin. Emmett, Tief in meinem Herzen, in the English original Emmett, Down in My Heart, is a theater film, a hybrid of theater and film, an art form that is not really new if we think of films like Dogville by Lars von Trier in 2003, the 1985 adoption of Death of a Salesman by Volker Schlöndorff, or the 2017 August Wilson adoption of Fences by Denzel Washington. However, over the past 2 years, the art form of the theater film has become an integral and important part of film and theater programs, at least here in Germany. Maybe another of the very few positive side effects of the pandemic. Our theater film, Emmett, Down in My Heart, is based on a dramatic text by the American author Claire Koss. The German translation is by Christiane Buchner. And we originally planned to stage it as a theater play, and it got postponed 3 times due to COVID before we decided to turn it into a film. It's in German with English subtitles. Emmett, Down in My Heart tells the true story of Emmett Till, 14-year-old African-American teenager who was lynched in Mississippi in 1955 after being accused of offending a white woman in her grocery store, in her family's grocery store. Emmett's body was found in the Tallahatchie River, brutalized beyond recognition. His 2 murderers were acquitted by an all-white male jury, and protected by the double jeopardy clause, they later confessed the murder of Emmett Till for a fee of $4,000 to Look magazine. At the funeral, Emmett's mother, Mamie Till Mobley, insisted on an open casket and invited journalists to take pictures so the world could see what had been done to her son. The brutality of his murder and the fact that his killers were acquitted drew attention to the long history of racist hate crimes and violent persecution of African Americans in the United States. Emmett Till's death and his mother's courageous decision helped to ignite the civil rights movement in the US. So what distinguishes a Black German perspective in regards to an artistic treatment of the story of Emmett Till? Born and raised in Germany, I started acting at the age of 6 or 7 and grew up in a theater tradition where Black Germans and other Germans of color were practically non-existent in film and theater. Until very recently, role offers for Black actors or actors of Turkish, Arabic, or Asian descent were more or less limited to a handful of parts as servants, drug dealers, or refugees that portray BPOC in a stereotypical and racist way. The first time I saw actors of color in both classic and modern, contemporary and historic films and plays, and acting complex roles and not a white idea of what is Black, was in the late 90s in London, where I studied acting at Goldsmiths College and RADA. I got to know a film and theater scene that was so utterly different from what I knew from Germany. In terms of its representation of artists of color on stage and backstage, in front of and behind the camera, that it deepened my belief that actors of color should be entitled and given the opportunity to enact anything and anyone they want, to soar above and go beyond a so-called realism that reduces them to a racist stereotypes in art as well as in real life. I believe that what we consider to be real or true, not only as artists, but as human beings, is decisively determined by the respective perspective from which we perceive and experience the world. And the perspective from which I, as a Black German female artist, look at life and art makes me want to go beyond what I was taught is real in order to expose something which I considered to be much more real and true, a privilege that white actors have always had. The official, institutionalized artistic practice of a country or a nation financed by the state, like in Germany, and or strong private investors, as often in the US, is very closely linked to its predominant concept of reality and truth. And this predominant concept of reality and truth is almost always the concept of the male, white, heterosexual, abled, so-called majority. So let's have a brief look at the predominant concept of reality and truth in German theater and film, which is a very interesting one, I can assure you. Emmett, Down in My Heart is, as I've already mentioned, a theater film, a hybrid of theater and film, not a film, nor merely filmed theater. We shot the entire movie in an empty factory hall in Berlin-Marzahn in the summer of 2021. And so we didn't work with changing locations, but created different settings of the story solely through light, a very minimalistic stage set, sound, and through acting, and thus generated a very theatrical form language. At the same time, we employed the entire spectrum of cinematic means and filmic storytelling, like cuts, crossfades, or split screens. I think the art form of a theater film is a great genre for staging something as complex and constructed as identity, as complex and constructed as blackness and whiteness, because generally spoken, the art form of film feels more committed to show a so-called realism, whereas theater has much more freedom to conceive spaces, historical eras, or human identities. To apply these fundamentally different, if not contradicting, artistic approaches in one production seems to correspond with the constructedness of identity and the inherent contradictions of a phenomena like racism. Considering the freedom the theater traditionally has to conceive any kind of reality, it is all the more incomprehensible that up to approximately 10 years ago, Black actors and other POC artists were more or less absent in German theater and film, or in German theater. In the German film industry, the fact that they hardly ever appeared on screen was usually explained with a strange definition of realism, an alleged all-white German reality the majority of German filmmakers felt the duty to depict. And hence, Black Germans, Black people in Germany, were not part of this reality. The racist narrative that underlies that is that BPOC allegedly have no history in this country, and hence there are no stories to be told about them. Also, to be German is marked with to be white, which of course goes straight back to the ideology of the Nazis. However, the notion that she who is Black cannot be German and vice versa existed long before the Nazis came into power, and it still exists today. And so anything and anyone read as non-white cannot be German, and hence is not entitled to represent the German culture on a theater stage or film screen. So the German film industry for a long time explained the absence of Black actors and narratives about Black people with a downright lie, and depicted a reality that was precisely not real, and the exact opposite of everyday reality in Germany. Because of course, BPOC are and always have been an important and integral part of both German history and presence. At the same time, German theater, free to claim and depict any reality, visionary or already there, and traditionally a place of innovative thinking and bold visions, simply refused to include Black people into these visions, not even into the non-realistic futuristic ones. So you really have to take that in. What it means that this happens in a country that is famous for its Regietheater, the director's theater. The director's theater established itself as a predominant theater practice in Germany around the 1970s. It allows the director to do with a play whatever he or she wants. That's why it's called director's theater, because it is his or her responsibility to reveal to the audience the essence of a play by opening up new levels of meaning that go beyond the boundaries of a well-made play. It means Romeo and Juliet can be set in the Stone Age or a death of a salesman can take place in an all-alien society on Mars, or Goethe's Faust can be staged with an all-female cast. All that is possible because the director doesn't feel obliged to any kind of realism, not even to what the author defines in the text. So the author in German theater is traditionally a much weaker position than in the Anglo-American context. And yet still Black actors and other POC artists are more or less absent on and behind the stage and screen. And they are also dramatically underrepresented in other key positions in artistic boards or film juries in the casting or production processes. So I took you on a little detour through German theater and film history to explain to you some of the characteristics and traditions in German theater and film in regard to staging or not staging Black and white identities. So imagine what it means to tell the story of Emmett Till in a theater film within a German context, which means within a film tradition that is dedicated to a realism that does not even remotely depict the diverse German society that we are living in 2022, and a director's theater tradition that assumes everything is possible on stage except for Black people in an Ibsen or a Shakespeare or a Schiller or a Tennessee Williams or any play really, unless it explicitly deals with issues around racism from a white perspective, of course, or it explicitly says in the character description, this character is Black. Of course, most character descriptions also do not explicitly say this character is white, but everybody assumes it. And even if the character description says this character is Black, until recently, that was not a reason to hire Black actors. Because blackfacing was an integral and often used artistic practice in German theater. By the way, this only started to change in 2012 with the so-called blackfacing scandal around the production of the Pulitzer Prize-winning play Clyburn Park by the American author Bruce Norris, who did not allow German theaters to use blackfacing for one of the Black characters in his play. Imagine what it means to tell the story of Emmett to a German audience, Black or white, that grew up with this theater and film tradition, which often not even allowed Black and other POC actors to play themselves. Because Black, Asian, Arabic, or whatever non-white characters were played by white actors with so-called ethnic makeup. Imagine what it means to make a theater film about the story of Emmett Till on a continent, Europe, and a country, Germany, where Emmett Till is largely unknown, where people do not even know their own Emmett Tills, George Floyd's, and Breonna Taylor's, Black people who were murdered in Germany in a very similar way, including a complete failure of justice. People like Amadeo Antonio in 1990, Boris Jallo in 2005, the 9 victims of the NSU killers between 2000 and 2006, or people like Yang Ji Lee in 2016, to name just a few from a very long list of victims of racist murder in Germany. Yet, other than in the US, a large majority of Germans and a large majority of German artists, theater and filmmakers still think racism is not as rooted in the genesis and culture of this country as it is in other European countries like Britain, France, or Spain. Because many Germans don't know that Germany also was a colonial power that benefited from slavery. And what we learn at school and also through theater and film about German history is that the Holocaust was this horrific but singular event in our history that had nothing to do with what happened before the Nazis came to power, and it has nothing to do with what is happening in Germany today. And by the way, we just commemorated the 2nd anniversary of the racist murder of 8 men and a pregnant woman in the city of Hanau. Over the last decade, discourses around racism became a very popular subject of German film and theater productions, especially since the murder of George Floyd in 2020. As long as they are set in far away countries like the US or South Africa. So racism is this horrible, ugly, distasteful thing that always happens somewhere else, especially in the US. For most Germans, racism is an American problem, whereas here in Germany, they are regrettable but isolated cases that do not reflect a structural problem. What can also be observed in German theater and film is a strong preference with what I would describe as the extreme terrorist forms of racism, like racist hate crimes, racist murder. Whereas the other two very common forms of racism, institutionalized racism in political, social, and also artistic institutions in the jurisdiction and legislation, kindergarten, schools, and university, and also in the theater and film industry, and B, everyday interpersonal racism on the bus, in a grocery store, at the hairdressers, on the playground, and so forth, are largely omitted. And this is, I think, because institutionalized as well as everyday racism are falling within our direct responsibility. So we, as the so-called educated middle class center of society, would have to start asking ourselves uncomfortable questions like, what did I do or not do that something like the murder of George Floyd or Uri Jallo or the Hanau killings could happen? How do I contribute, even if not intentionally, to a social and political climate that encourages right-wing extremists to commit violent racist crimes? So again, what does it mean to make a theater film about the story of Emmett Till from a Black German perspective in Germany? When I was working on the film adaptation, and especially when I prepared for my role in the film, the role of Rand Taylor, a white high school teacher in the Mississippi of 1955, I asked myself again and again, what is Black? And what is white? And if you take away the most superficial, So when I was working on the film adaptation, and especially when I prepared for my role in the film, for the role of Rand Taylor, a white high school teacher in the Mississippi of 1955, I asked myself and again, what is Black and what is white? If you take away the most superficial and the most constructed definition of it, the skin color. If you take away the construction of Black and white skin, what is Black and what is white? What defines Black and white? Your appearance, your family, genes, roots, culture, tradition, experience, privilege. How do I, as a Black actress, play a white woman? How do I play white? How does anyone, even white people, play white? In theater, as well as in real life? And also, what distinguishes a Black perspective and what distinguishes a Black perspective in regard to the story of Emmett Till? How does it differ from a white perspective, and in which ways does it reflect in artistic decisions I make as a producer, director, and actress concerning the film? And what might distinguish a Black German perspective from a Black American perspective? So the work on the Emmett film also made me reflect deeply and profoundly on my Germanness, being German. It was very clear to me that if we as Black actors wanted to deliver a complex performance of a white character, not a stereotype as it often happens when white actors enact Black characters, we had to find something in ourselves to relate to these characters. I cannot play someone that I cannot relate to in any way, shape, or form. And of course, to, as a Black actor, relate to a white character within the context of a story of Emmett Till, that displays the most horrific and dreadful excesses of racism and white supremacy is a great challenge. The fact that we as Black artists accepted this challenge, that we portrayed white racists as human beings, cowardly, sometimes charming, sometimes monstrous human beings whose existence is difficult to endure, but still human beings, that already for me is a Black approach to acting and to depicting identity. To look beyond the facade, the construction, beyond the skin colors, and beyond my own hurt feelings when I, as a Black actress, have to portray someone that I'm suffering from in real life on a daily basis. One of the great strengths of Claire Korr's wonderful play is that it portrays the complex structures from which racism derives and that keeps it alive. The play reveals all the different levels of racism. The shop owner, Roy Bryant, Emmett's murderer, and his wife, Calvin Bryant, are only the top of the iceberg, as they're surrounded by a silent white majority of followers. The play also reveals the various ways in which racism is interwoven and linked to other systems of oppression, such as sexism or classism. So when I talk to you about staging Blackness and Whiteness from a Black German perspective, I'm very aware of the fact that there cannot be a single definition of Blackness and Whiteness, of being German or being American, of a German or American perspective, because these terms in themselves are, again, infinitely heterogeneous. So I would like to share with you what a Black German perspective implies for me, or more precisely, what it implies for me as a producer, director, and actress in regard to our theater film, Emmett, Down in My Heart. So to conclude, I would like to outline some of the fundamental artistic decisions I made, both content related and aesthetically, staging the story of Emmett Till in Germany. First, the depiction of racist violence. When I started to work on the film adaptation of Claire's wonderful theater play, it was my primary goal from the very beginning to tell the story of the racist motivated lynching of Emmett Till without a visual or audible reenactment of physical violence. The horrors that Emmett had to endure are not depictable. They are not comprehensible or feelable for us. So for me, any attempt to achieve that would trivialize the unspeakable horror Emmett Till went through and would equal an extreme form of the "I can understand what you feel" statements from white people that BPOC have to put up with time and again. I wanted to challenge conventional habits of perception in regard to the depiction of racist violence and abandon any picture, sound effect, or acting that reproduce physical violence by displaying tortured Black bodies. So in the kidnapping scene, for instance, in which Emmett's killer, Roy Bryant, abducts him from his uncle's house, there's no physical interaction between any of the actors. The violence is conveyed entirely through language, bodily expressions, light, and the positioning of the actors in the space. At no point does the film show the well-known photo of Emmett's brutalized body, nor do we hear his screams when he is tortured. The murder of Emmett is told in a monologue scene by the white high school teacher, Rowan Taylor, who hears his cries for help, but they are not audible for us as the audience. What we hear, or rather feel, is an tinnitus-like, tinnitus or tinnitus? How do you,
both, I think.
tinnitus?
Tinnitus,
Okay.
tinnitus.
Tinnitus. So what we feel or hear, or rather feel, is a tinnitus-like very high noise that rings and vibrates in our bones and ears, causing an almost unbearable physical discomfort. When Emmett's mother, Mamie Till, opens the casket and sees the body of his son disfigured beyond recognition, it is only through her description, through her eyes, that we see Emmett's body. Thus the images of what has been done to Emmett originate in the heads of the audience and bring us much closer, I think, to the horror and the pain than any picture ever could. Second, the depiction of blackness and whiteness. It was one of the first and most fundamental artistic decisions I made for the production of Emmett's story to have an all-black cast. That means all characters in the movie, the 5 black and the 3 white characters, are played by black actors. I was not at all interested in the white interpretation of whiteness. That is omnipresent in film and theater anyway. I was interested in a black interpretation of whiteness, not in a comedy-like or caricaturing way, but through psychological play, and especially because we're dealing with discourses around racism. For me, the most important and relevant interpretation of whiteness is the black interpretation of whiteness, because it is only from a black perspective that we can fully understand the constructedness of whiteness and be introduced to a new concept of reality, the reality through a black gaze. To offer a depiction of black and white identities that go beyond the construct of skin color, that for me is a black perspective. Our film offers a black interpretation of whiteness, of the most horrific aspects of whiteness. I myself play a white character, the high school teacher, Rowan Taylor, who might be best described as what you would call today a liberal, progressive, middle-class woman, who is all enthusiastic about Black people, believes they should have the right to vote, is convinced that it is not right that they are virtually second-class citizens, but at the decisive moment doesn't have the courage, strength, and stamina to speak up.
You're muted.
To cast Black people in white roles also means to reclaim the very basic right of an actor to enact anything and anyone they want. So the very essence of acting is to become someone else, to enact someone or something I am not, to dive into someone else's reality and personality that is not mine. Also a privilege that white actors have always had. Third, it is crucial to me to show that Emmett Till's story is not an exclusively American story. Because sadly and shockingly, what happened to Emmett Till and so many others repeats itself daily. As I mentioned before, not only in the US, but also here in Germany. I want the audience to understand that the story of Emmett Till reverberates in contemporary Germany, and that it teaches us about our own history, our own past, and our own present. That is why the film contains 2 narrative levels. The fictional level, set in Chicago and Mississippi in 1955, and a performative level where we as actors step out of the stage characters we embody, comment on our own play, connect with our ancestors, and also refer to cases of racist hate crimes in Germany, as well as a political climate that keeps shifting to the right. The Emmett Till story is not only a story about right-wing extremism. That's also something that was really important for me to bring across, but also about everyday racism that paves the way to what eventually will be racist motivated murder. It is not only a story about the horrors of racism, but also about the silent majority. It is a story about the most heroic and glorious acts of Black resistance and triumph, and everything in between. Outspoken and silent opposition, moral cowardice, and follow my leader mindsets, unshakable belief, courage, and moral integrity. It is not only a story about Emmett Till, it is also a story about us. It teaches us about our own power, that we can make a decision and that we are responsible for whatever we do or not do, say or not say, think or maybe rethink. We are responsible. I think of Emmett Till and I feel responsible as a Black and as a German human being and as a human being. And I never again can claim that I'm not responsible. That, for me, defines my Black German perspective in regard to the story of Emmett Till.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That was really enlightening. And I'm glad we are going to be able to have a conversation about this theater film. And I'd like to remind our audience to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. Use the chat to share love and say hi. While the audience thinks of questions, let me get started with a few. Lara, you and I, we talked about this theater film, and I'm wondering if you could take us to the moment where you found out about Claire Cross's play and how you and your team decided on including it, as how and why at this point in time you and your team decided to perform Emmett Deep in My Heart. You could take us to that moment.
Yeah, that was a process rather than a moment, I think. So Claire approached us 6 or 7 years ago, so quite some time ago. Yeah, asking us, whether we would like to stage her play, Emmett Down in My Heart, here in Germany, to have the world premiere here in Germany. And at that time, we were, as a collective, at a point where we had just decided that we don't want to do something about racism again, or about black and white and all this. We just want to do something completely else. And then Claire approached us with this play, and we read it and we just loved it, because as I've already mentioned before, what I think, what one of the many points that makes it very strong is that is not only about racism, it's also about other systems of oppression that are closely interlinked and interwoven with racism. And so it portrays the phenomena of racism and of what happened to Emmett Till in a very complex and deep and profound way, and we love that. So, and we especially thought, we need that here in Germany, because as I tried to outline, it's like, in terms of racism and the public discussion about racism, we are really at the very beginning. So we thought, this would be a wonderful play to stage here, because the many plays about racism or that deal with issues around racism, discourses around racism in Germany, are from a white perspective, and the characters are often portrayed in a very stereotypical way, and then there's the white savior, who changes and becomes a better human being and all of that. And we wanted to show something else. So that was when we decided that we would love to do that play. And then it was just a long process of trying to find funding, because of course nobody was waiting for a Black artists collective staging the story of Emmett Till in Germany. So that was a long process. And then when we finally got it, Corona hit, and we had to postpone it again and again and again before we decided to turn it into film, which now I think is a blessing, really, because so many people can see it, and it is not limited to a few theater performances. So that's basically how we came to do it.
With Claire Cross approaching Label Noir or you, was it part of the play that Black actors would be portraying all the roles? Was that already part of the play, or did that become part of the play the moment Claire Cross contacted you all and you all decided you love the play and you want to perform it? Because I was wondering if Claire Cross is a white woman, white American woman, white Northern American woman, right? Who writes a play on Emmett Till. Mm-hmm. And in my socialization here in the US, and also with, over years, Emmett Till being the subject of art or storytelling by white people, and the backlash that I remember from years back on social media, brought up the question whether or not Emmett Till is a story that anybody who's not African American can tell, whether or not Emmett Till is an African American story to tell only. So I'm wondering how much of what you as a director, and I believe you and Dela as a director, have included or have added to the performance. How much of that is this wonderful end result, and whether or not that might have looked different if Claire Cross would have approached a different theater crew?
Yeah, it definitely would have looked different, because a different theater group would have staged it differently. Probably also a different Black theater group would have staged it differently. So that's what I tried to made clear that one thing that I really learned from working on the Emmett film was that, so there is nothing like one black or white or American or German perspective on this. And you can just as well say, that it is an American story that should only be told by African Americans. For my feeling, and that's what I try to explain why, it is a black story, and it is a story that sadly, happens like again and again and repeats itself again and again, daily, everywhere in the world, and also here in Germany. So when we did research on Emmett Till and then also on racist murders here in Germany, what really struck me was the parallels between all of these cases. I mean, it's like even details, and as I said, including the complete failure of justice, and how the people were murdered, not only killed but tortured. And I mean, there's so many parallels between what many of the cases that happened here in Germany and the case of Emmett Till, that for me, yes, in a way, it or not only in a way, it is an American story, and at the same time, for me, it's a universal black story. That, yeah, and sadly, is true and repeats itself up to this day. So, and when you ask, what our contribution was, or what our, how much of the film is our, based on our artistic decisions, it's like more or less everything. So we, so it was our decision that we communicated to Claire very early on, that because otherwise we wouldn't have done it, that we want an all-black cast. So for me, it wouldn't have been possible as a director, but also as an actress, to do this play with white actors playing the white characters and black actors playing the black characters. And even though I know it's fictional, or everybody knows it's fictional, but I don't want to see a white actor doing that to a black actor, or in that moment, for me, human being, as reflected and politically on the right side that white actor might be. But I just, so as I said before, I was just not interested in the right interpretation of whiteness, because I think we had that, and we had very good white interpretations of whiteness. I don't want to say this is all bad, or it shouldn't exist, but we had that already. We have lots of that, but I never saw, or rarely ever saw, a black interpretation of whiteness, at least not in Germany, and not in a comedian kind of way, but in psychological play, to really try to get to the core what whiteness is. And that's what I found interesting, and it opens up so many layers of, because we're obviously not white, so the audience watches that and they see we're obviously not white, and we're portraying these white characters, and that forces you to go, to the core of what is white and what is black, and also forces you, I guess, to, which was challenging, to see them as human beings, which makes it even more horrible. They're not monsters or not a species, but the people who did this, and the people who did this to Emmett Till, were human beings, and that is just something that I still can't comprehend. It was, Claire really gave us all freedoms with this play, and we and not only that, so she supported all the decisions that we made. Also, you know, passages that we omitted, for example, in the original play, you know, there are the screams. She wrote the screams of Emmett when he's tortured. They're written down in the play, but it was like, for me, no, you know, I don't want to. They're not going to be part of our interpretation of it, because we don't need it. We don't need it. Again, so we're preoccupied with, oh my God, it's so horrible what happened to him. It is horrible, but that's not, you know, I want to make people think about themselves, and you know, I don't want white tears. I want, you know, I want them to, yeah. So if, for example, the scene where Emmett is murdered, which is told through Roanne Taylor, to think of all the moments, and that's why Roanne also had flashbacks, all the moments where she could have done something, where she could have, you know, where she was asked for help by one of the Black characters, and she didn't do anything. So, you know, I wanted that to be the center of the scene, and not the suffering of Emmett, because it's, you know, we know that we don't have to reenact it. Yeah.
I, with your permission, was able to show this to my students in class at Howard, and we talked about different instances, and I asked them, you know, how's whiteness performed, how's Blackness performed, and what seems, you know, specifically Black German. And we had great conversations. And we, you know, I think it's fair to say that, you know, I had some students who had mixed feelings about exactly this question, whether or not the white characters in this play should at all be humanized. To which I told them and I quoted you, well, but they are human, and then what, right? And I think with fruitful conversation came out of how the other ways of performing whiteness, and we discussed at length the moment where I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the actress's name, and she played Roy's wife.
Zamia.
Thank you. Yeah, as Zamia sits in that beautiful dress and also costume, gorgeous makeup, gorgeous. A shout out to Liana, who was the makeup artist. Just really beautiful costume and makeup and hair. But she sits on the chair with the radio, and music and sounds is something that you weave in through the entire theater film, and have important elements of like the Black German experience, right? Because she sits on a chair, and she has this little radio in her lap, and it's really just a close-up of the radio on her lap and her fingers moving the dial. And the first sound we hear is a reportage of Uriallo, and or a news report on the murder of Uriallo, and her Black fingers, but we have to remember she's playing a white character, very quickly turn away. And you know, my students and I, we were saying, if that's not the whitest thing to do at that particular moment, right? To like look away, to not want to hear anything about a racist murder, to just, it was just frantically turning the dial almost. That was like, you know, so striking. And then the second sound that we heard was Amazing Grace, which later on your character, the teacher, also then hears right before the murder of Emmett Till takes place. And there she also frantically away with Amazing Grace, and then she comes to Mr. Sandman and has this entire dance scene with all of you in a very yeah, you know, almost white woman dream of femininity during the time, and whimsical dancing, almost dreamlike, fairy tale like, taking her away from the reality of just being in the store. As yeah, and I think you know, my students picked up on the different choir scenes too, and felt like one is a portrayal of a white church, one is a portrayal of a Black church, and they could see that in the singing, in the movements almost. So I think there were great moments where whiteness is portrayed in this production in so many other ways that I just want to congratulate you on, and because I found it very striking that you were able to do that, right? And I think, and I reminded my students too, like the strong emotions that they have, and like not wanting to feel for the student, sorry, for the teacher who's hearing with this high pitched tone, you know, hearing Emmett's the murdering of him. You know, they didn't want to feel bad for her, and I didn't want to feel bad for Roy. But I think, you know, and maybe if they were played by white actors, we wouldn't have felt as bad. I think there's a connection that we're also doing while we're looking at you portraying it, understanding that you are playing a white character, but there's something like that it's very hard to keep it in clear boxes of who's supposed to be whom, and like as we're looking, we're reading you also differently, and yeah, emotions come up that are confusing or were confusing for students. So I think all of that like really speaks to the power of what you were trying to do and what you were doing with the play. Let me allow you to respond, of course.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, I just wanted to maybe start with the end, because it shouldn't be in clear, it should be in clear boxes, and at the same time, it shouldn't be in clear boxes. And it's a very thin line. So it should be in clear boxes in terms of, you know, at no point do we want to explain or excuse what Roy Bryan or Carolyn Bryan or even Rowan Taylor did, you know, and that's what I mean with it. It's a thin line to portray them as human beings. At the same time, not to say, oh, you know, they had a horrible childhood, or they're just white trash with no money, that's why they did it, you know, to excuse what they did, but to relate to a character doesn't. So that's what I found out about me. So it might be different for the next Black actor, but for me, I found out to relate to a character doesn't mean to excuse or understand or like them. You know, that's something else. That's something different. So, and that's why at the same time, there shouldn't be boxes. And I feel that's what the white gaze does. So, you know, I generalize now, of course there's exceptions, but white directors or white actors often do, you know, it's very clear. This is like this, and this is like that, and it's very, it remains on a surface. It doesn't go to the core of the problem, and the core of the problem hurts and is confusing, and you know, may shatter your beliefs and convictions. But from my understanding, there's no way around that. And you know, I'm German. I have to. So my daughter is now 5, and it already starts because we have these Stolpersteine in Berlin, like in the pavement, in the sidewalk, little golden kind of gold stones covered with a golden surface, and it tells there's you know, written on it that Jewish people live there in that house that you're standing in front, and when they were deported and when they died. So, and now, you know, it started to, my daughter started to ask me, you know, we stopped on the street, said, oh, what is this and what is that and what does it mean? And so, you know, how do you explain that? You know, how do you that? So I'm mentioning that because, you know, I said getting to the core of the problem. How do I explain that to her? And I'm German too. I can't draw myself out of this just because I'm Black. You know, I'm German. So everyone connected with this country has a history during the Nazi period. You know, I had family that decided to be on one side or the other or somewhere in between, but they were involved. So you have to, you know, how do I explain that? How do you explain the unexplainable to a child or even to yourself? So that's why I think, you know, I don't want to do the same thing that the white gaze does, to put people into boxes or races into boxes and say, you know, you are like that and that's it. I want to look behind that, and I want to dismantle the constructedness, even if the white gaze doesn't do that for me. But I don't want to be on the same level. So I want to go beyond that. And again, it doesn't mean that I want to, then I want us to feel sorry for Roy or Ren. So not, you know, no. It also has something to do with responsibility, because if we portray them as human beings, they're also responsible. If we portray them as aliens or monsters, you know, a monster is not responsible, or an animal. How can you hold an animal responsible for what they do? You know, but you can hold a human being responsible. So I think it's also that, because I don't accept, you know, oh, they have to do it because they're white. No, that's what I mean. You can still decide in each and every moment. And it's very interesting when you said about the scene, you know, with Samia and her black fingers, like, you know, trying to get rid of this, you know, Uri Jallo report. And because what I find so fascinating about it is that the complexity of it, because of course you have to remind yourself, or I reached a point, I have to be honest, where I didn't have to remind myself anymore. For me, she was Carolyn Bryant. I didn't see her black hands anymore. But then the moment I did, you know, because as an actor, even though you're playing a fictional character, you always bring something of yourself to the table. There's always something of your experience and your life and your personality that you put into that character. And in this case, it's from her experience in her life, in her reality as a Black woman. So the few moments that I saw the Black woman and not the white character, it got another quality for me. It was Samia who can't listen to that anymore. And I often have that. You know, I didn't go to, there were like, I also worked on this Keynote, but there were demonstrations and you know, events because of the commemoration of the Hanau killings. And I felt after doing this production last summer, and then we cutted it, and we're still very much involved in the film. I can't, so I posted something, we lit a candle here at home. I couldn't go there. I just couldn't, you know, I have days where I just can't hear it anymore. I switch off the radio because I cannot take it in anymore. There are other days when I can, but there are days where I consciously have to say, no, I'm not going to, I have to do something else now, because otherwise I go crazy. So these moments where I saw her black fingers, the scene for me had another quality. And that's what I mean. It's like interesting, you know, the different layers that open up. And also the scene with Roanne that you mentioned, you know, because I asked myself, what would I do if I would witness a murder, like a prostitute? I'm all on my own. I'm the only one on the street, and somebody like is murdered, and I see it, and I see police nearby not doing anything. What would I do? Would I go over there and say, hey, what are you doing? And get killed myself? Probably. I'm not sure what I would do. But what I found out, and that is again something between Roanne and me, what I regard as much worse is all the things that she did before that. So when she refused to help Mose and Lissy, and you know, when she not stood up and said something, when somebody used the N-word, and all of that, that final moment where he is murdered, you know, I didn't come to a conclusion yet, but I asked myself again and again, what do I expect her to do in that moment? What would I have done in that moment? If I can't rely on the police, if I can't rely on the, you know, the system around me, what can I do? And I'm not saying what she did is right. It's just that I'm saying, so when I see that scene, for example, I also see myself as a Black woman in that situation. Like, what, I have to do something precisely because I am Black, but what can I do without getting killed myself? You know, so that's why I think there are many layers to it. And I just wanted to also, because you mentioned the costumes, you mentioned Layana and also Geraldine. I just wanted to mention her, Geraldine Arnold. She did the costumes. And that for me, because, and I'm very happy that you mentioned it, is also empowering just to see these beautiful Black actors, also the actor of Roy and also the actor of Carolyn, also the actor of the Black roles, but in these great costumes. That is just so important because they look so great in these costumes. And, you know, also the dancing was, the music came in because I realized when I read the play that I always had to stop at the same point. I had to stop after, you know, before the bubblegum scene, because I knew, okay, now it comes. Now all this happens, what eventually leads to Emmett's murder. And a few other points in the play. And I always had to stop there and bring a cup of coffee and get, you know, and stop. And then I thought, you know, that's where the music came in, and these musical kind of style, kind of dancing. And that was very much, to be honest with you, for us as Black actors, also for empowering, you know, an empowering factor to just dance and sing and be beautiful within all this horror. And also, of course, you know, it adds a layer to Caroline as a character, because she just wants to leave, and she's stuck there with this violent husband, and she dreams herself someplace else, you know. So yeah, but that's how the music came in there. Also the Ain't Got No Home, you know, because we always felt, what do we do after the murder of, how can we continue this? So we can't just have the next scene. We have to come together as actors and do something, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was very touching how you, after the scene of hearing Emmett's murder break out, and, you know, it's then, we then get the reminder of the beginning when everybody comes in and everybody's ancestors and are placed in a way as if they are the audience, right, in front of the stage. You then, after that scene where Emmett is killed, take off your wig, and there's some lighting and smudging of Palo Santo. There's some some community, there is a hug that happens right after that difficult scene, and then you stand in front of this wall where we are then reminded of all the racist murders in Germany, in addition to racist murders in the United States, and all of that is really touching. I want to make sure that I get audience questions, of course, in as well. So first question we have is about the availability of the film and how theater film and how audience member asked they would love to see the film and view it with their students. What should they do? What are some of your plans with the film coming up, and how can and when can people have access?
Yeah, so we definitely want to, give it the big stage that it deserves. So we want to bring it to film festivals and to movie theaters. So at the moment, I mean, it's streamed for a week after the pre-premiere. So that was only a pre-premiere because there's more material of this second level that I mentioned, the performance level, where we step out of the characters, be ourselves, talk about what we've just enacted, and reflect on our roles. And there's much more material of that that we will also integrate into the film. So the real movie theater premiere will hopefully take place within the next year, because the film has also to undergo, further sound mastering and color grading, and we need money for that, and so it'll take a while, but it will happen. And until then, it's not really possible to watch it, at least not in a cinema or a movie theater. Yeah, that is what we intend to do. But we definitely want to give it a big stage, and yeah.
Wonderful. There is also a question on the blackfacing. Practices similar to blackfacing have also been paid serious attention in the critique of North American cinema, where in productions for many years, American and Canadian First Nations heroes and fairy tale heroes were represented by white ethnic actors. How can this practice be effectively corrected in German cinema, considering that nowadays economic concerns and audience expectations seem to be the main reason for cinematic productions?
Well, yeah, so first of all, it's like in Germany, it hasn't been so much film. I mean, it was also in film, but I think that was before the war, really, or maybe in the 50s and 60s, but that hasn't happened for a longer period of time. But in theater, it's a very common practice still, and it was really common and not questioned in any way, shape, or form up to 10 years ago. So as I said, Bruce Norris was actually the one, interestingly enough, a white man from Texas who triggered the blackfacing campaign discussion, the anti-blackfacing discussion here in Germany. Of course, we as the Black community and Black activists have been doing it for centuries here, but nobody listened to them. So when he stood up and said, I won't let you make my play if you don't cast Black actors, and then the theater said, refused to do it, and he withdrew the rights from them, and that was that. So yeah, it was in theater, or it is mainly in theater, and what can be done to abolish that tradition? It's, yeah, just convince people, not to do it anymore. I mean, there are lots of discussions going on. A group formed itself after that incident 10 years ago called Bühnenwatch, Stage Watch. And their goal is to fight racist structures in the arts, especially in theater and film. I experience it more and more that Black actors refuse to play in racist plays, even if it's big theaters. You know, a couple of years ago, we were all happy we could play at all in a play or at a theater, and now, you know, that changed, and people refuse and say no, you know, and even if that means they don't earn the money, and even if that means they're not doing it anymore. So I think it's, as always, you know, the real change comes from grassroots activism, really, before they really change something. And I also think, you know, like, crazy enough, but the pandemic and the streaming services that became even more important during the pandemic, they did a lot to improve that situation, because now, you know, the next generation, not only the next generation, everybody's, you know, watching, like, you know, films and series from the US, from other European countries, you know, they're accessible, and they see that a Black protagonist works and brings money, you know, into the into the film industry. They see and they say, okay, wait a minute, they always told us the audience wouldn't understand it. And, you know, that was the realism I was talking about, this strange kind of realism. And they actually see that it works, that it's good. These are amazing films, amazing theater, you know, and also during the pandemic, lots of theater was streamed from other countries. So you can see now that it works. So people here want the same thing, you know, and if it's only for economic reasons, because they say, you know, if we continue like this, the film industry dies, you know, nobody wants to see that anymore. We have to invite these new faces and new stories and narratives in.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to combine the next two questions. There was one question from audience member about how did it feel to go to Marzahn. As a Black person, quote, I would not go to Berlin Marzahn because of its reputation. How was it going there and doing a film with an entirely Black cast? How were you received? And then reception is also a question from the next audience member. How was the production received by the German audiences? What did the critics say? Were any of the critics Black, and what did they say?
Yeah, very good question. So Marzahn, it was funny because I thought, when I prepared the keynote, I thought, should I say something about Berlin Marzahn? And I thought, oh, nobody's gonna know it anyway. But so Berlin Marzahn is, it was at first, so to be honest, when we first saw the location, because it was perfect for what we wanted to do, you know, an old factory building, but we decided against it because it was in Marzahn. So we said, we can't, you know, it's not possible, we can't come here every day, because it's not only us Black actors, you know, a large part of the cast, of the crew was Black too, or POC. So we said, no, we can't do that. And then we kept looking, but we didn't find anything that was as perfect as this venue. And then we went back there and we openly talked to the, you know, people who rented it out to us, to the company, and talked to them about our concerns. And they said, which proved to be true. So a lot of things changed in Marzahn too. So there's also gentrification there. And the good side of it is that they, you know, it's also much more diverse. So, and we could see that, you know, during our lunch breaks, or, you know, when we like spent time there, there were quite a lot of POC, Black POC people But still, of course, yeah, it was never, I mean, you know, it was always in the background. I mean, we kind of, you know, saw to it that nobody takes the underground train on its own or on her own or his own, and that we, you know, give people a lift. And so that was always, we relaxed more with time. But it was always, you know, this feeling, there was always a kind of baseline that was still, so we, you know, still some kind of tension. And we had one situation where we were rehearsing outside and we saw a group of people approaching. You couldn't really saw it, but they didn't look good. And immediately it was, you know, it was like, I think 4 of us. It was also because it was just 4 of us. The others had gone home. And we immediately, you know, went inside, and I felt like Rand Taylor in a second, you know, because I was like, because then I realized the cameraman took the key. I couldn't lock. He accidentally took the key with him, so I couldn't lock the door. And then in seconds, I was thinking, okay, when they're coming in here, I'm gonna smash this window. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. That's probably also, you know, yeah, not probably. It is, of course, the you know, the Black experience. And I remember one of the stage set people building some stage set inside, a white man, and he said, "Oh, don't worry, you know, I'm here." And we were all like, we don't know whether, you know, we would rely on you if the worst comes to worst. But that was just, you know, it's one of these moments where you realize that the tension that you got used to, you know, that all the time, you know, your eyes in the back of your head, and you have all the time, like, does somebody move in a strange way? What's his facial expression? And then the group passed by the building, and some of us was looking out of the window and said, "Oh, there's a Black person in there, so it's not a problem. They're cool people." But it was a moment of angst. And I don't know what was the other question. Sorry, forgot.
Yeah, how the reception was of the German audience. What did the critics say? Were any of the critics Black? What did they say?
So the reception was really great. So as I said, it was only the pre-premiere, and it was at the How, our cooperation partner. It's a theater in Berlin, and it's still, you know, Corona. So it was only 150 people. It was sold out, but it couldn't be more than 150 people. But the reception was great. So we got amazing feedback, and people loved it. And yeah, so I think it's interesting that, you know, you mentioned that some of your Black or POC students had mixed feelings about us playing white people. I think many white people who came to the pre-premiere and knew that, you know, we had an all-Black cast, they were nervous too, because I think they thought, you know, we would do maybe the same thing that they're doing with us, and giving a stereotype, you know, a stereotype version of them. But yeah, so the feedback was very good. But we didn't have, there was one, you know, one review, I don't want to say by whom, but I was a little bit disappointed, because but that happens a lot with Black or POC productions. It was more a summary of the play than a review. You know, it was a summary. Nothing about us playing white characters, just a description of what happened. Yeah, so, and we didn't have any Black reviews on it. No, that's you know, that's also something in Germany. It's difficult to get reviews from Black journalists, or not because they don't exist, of course, but, you know, we're just not as good. So the network is not as good as maybe in the United States yet, but they're there, of course, and we will see to it that we have that for the real premiere, that we have also some journalists and theater critics, Black or of color. Yeah, which doesn't mean, they have to say, oh, it's all great and everything is wonderful about this movie, but it's different. It's different, as we all know. If they look at it, it's different. Also, the criticism will be different.
Yeah, and it'd be good to, did you get feedback from the Black German community in Germany? Did you get any of people outside of Label Noir that are part of the Black German community?
Yeah. So, as I said, not so many people could watch it yet because, it was at the evening of the pre-premiere, it was a very limited amount of seats. And then it streamed for only a week. And many people have problems with the, online is ticket, how to get your ticket and the link. And so many people didn't see it, didn't watch it. But all the Black and POC people audience that I was talking to so far, they really loved it. And I think so one thing I heard a couple of times was, this performance level, like where we step out of our roles. They would have liked to see more of that, but that's going to happen for the real premiere. But all of the people that I was talking to felt it was a great empowerment for them that we played these white characters and that we offered this Black gaze on whiteness. But I'm sure there will be controversial voices too. So that's good.
Yeah. Another comment, and this is something I was just thinking about last night as well. So the comment is, I'm wondering why you decided to include the cast gathering outside after the play in the film. It was a little startling to see this warmth and love after the events of the play itself. And I was wondering about that too. There's this at the end, Black, POC, white joy, community coming together, seeming just entirely, happy with, coming to the end of the production. Close-ups of people hugging. Can you tell us a little bit more why you decided to include that? Because at the end, right, the plan itself, there are a lot of things that we can't be joyous about, or that are difficult to, have. This elation, this happy mood. Can you tell me why it was important to add that, or to have that as the end?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it just shows very genuinely how happy we were that we could, that we really made it, and that we could tell the story. And because it was really difficult. I mean, you have to imagine, we were like, Dela and I worked on it since 7 years now, all the whole process with the application for funding, and then to find, then to translate it, and then to find a venue, and then eventually that happened, and then the pandemic came, and then it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and because it had to be postponed for so many times. Actors that had already been part of the cast, they couldn't do it anymore, and then this and that. It was a nightmare at many points, and we thought it would never happen. And it was so difficult to just get funding for a Black story done by a Black artist collective, to convince people to give us money for that. So I think what you see there, the last scene, is really it's just very genuine relief and happiness about the fact that we were able to tell the story of Emmett Till, and that we really, with the help of the ancestors, we're able to do this, and it was not staged. So we only did it once. So the only thing was, there's a camera outside, and we carry him on our back, and then we come outside, and that's it. So it was not like, oh, we're going to hug each other, or we want to show black and white unite, or something like that. It was just what happened in that moment, and that's what happened in that moment. And I feel that we had every right to, and everybody involved, to be proud and happy that we did this, because it was so hard. There was also at every point the danger that we had to stop shooting because someone is corona positive. We had to test ourselves every day, and all of that. So that's actually how the scene came about, and it remains. That's what I mean with complex. It remains controversial. You can see it depending on the perspective. I can think, why are they celebrating with these white people? But then you can also say, oh, okay, they've been part of the cast, and also when you see our ancestors, we didn't tell them bring black and white people. When we said bring photos of your ancestors, they just brought photos of their ancestors. They're black people, they're white people, they're Asian people, they're Native Americans, amongst them. They just brought what they brought. And they're also, we didn't say, oh, but only the black people, please, or only the, people brought photos of their grandparents. I don't know what they did during the Nazi period. I know what my grandparents did during the Nazi period, and that was also not all glorious, So we just said, bring the ancestors that you want to bring, and that gives you strength for whatever reason, because the people, these ancestors, this kind of altar was a place of to recharge our batteries, really. And I can't tell anyone to who that is. And if they say 5 white people that recharge their batteries, then it's 5 white ancestors, So that's why I think, you can, So I think also this scene, the beauty about the scene is that it's multi-layered, and that it's complex, and that it may trigger different feelings. That the way I remember it is just, oh God, we made it. And I'm so thankful to all those people, black and white, that we made it, and under really, really difficult circumstances. Because many people wouldn't have done that, black or white. Many people would have done, okay, I'm done. Thank you. It's too much for me. And these people really stick till the end, and
Wonderful. I'm very glad that they did, and that you all managed to celebrate at the end. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your work with us today. If there's anything else you'd like to say before we let the audience go on the short break, I think, and then maybe to the next, definitely to the next panel. Anything else you'd like to say?
I would love to, to continue discussions like this, to take the film as a starting point to continue, because I feel it's just, for me, it's just the beginning of a journey to, I thought I already know everything about racism, as I also tried to bring across in my keynote, or about my being German or so, and I discovered that I'm at the very beginning of that. And I would love to, especially with other Americans, and so especially, or with Americans and with other Afro-Americans, to keep, to stay in an exchange, and keep talking about the different discourses that this film and this story and this play contains. So I feel this is only the beginning of the discussion, and I'm very eager to learn. I would like to hear more, also the critical voices, what they liked about the film, what they didn't like about the film. So to just grow, actually. So I would love to continue this at some point.
Wonderful, and we should, absolutely. Thank you so much, Lara-Sophie Milagro. It was a pleasure. Thank you to our audience members for all the clapping emojis, love, and of course, thank you to everybody in the BGHRA for making this possible. And we'll see you soon.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the conference, and see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Tschüss.
Bye-bye.